Crysis, a game well remembered for making computers of its time catch fire and for being far ahead of its time graphically. But is Crysis really as good as we remember it to be? Or did we overlook the gameplay for those ahead of the time graphics? Graphically, Crysis is a beautiful game, especially for 2007, and it can still hold up decently against some modern titles, coming in far ahead of its time in looks and making many games of 2009 and 2010 look bad in comparison. In all fairness, I have to call out that some of the weapons textures, at least on certain weapons, aren't that great compared to other games, and often lack the 3D detailing that modern games have. I'm looking at the scar when I make this point. But yet again, this is a game from 2007, I don't expect it to be up to modern standards, and it's far ahead of anything released in its period, making console games of its time look like they could run on the PS2. The effects in this game are also pretty amazing. The fire and explosion effects look great for a game from 12 years ago. Crysis also features an extremely destructible environment, allowing you to ram into and knock down some entire buildings, all the trees, road signs and much more, making it feel fairly modern. On the other hand, some graphics look much more dated than the others, with things such as the Vital ships looking like they came from 2004's Doom 3. However, thankfully, these are few and far between, and that makes it much less annoying than it could have been. The story is, well, quite silly if I'm honest. You play as a super soldier, only known by the name of Nomad, and start with 4 teammates: Prophet, Psycho, Jester, and Aztec, who all have about as much personality as a house brick. And, while none of them are specifically annoying, none of them are really memorable either. At the end of the game though, Prophet manages to grab the leftover scraps of personality from Major Strickland, who has by far and away the most personality in the entire game, even though he's barely a deviation from a bog standard Call of Duty protagonist, and shows up for about 30 minutes worth of your playtime. After you meet your ragtag band of slightly cheaper knockoff Call of Duty protagonists, you drop onto an island full of North Korean soldiers and battle your way through them to find a research team that they're holding hostage. Oh, and quite suddenly, almost right at the beginning of the game, flying alien squid decide they hate you and start making spontaneous appearances while you fight your way around an island killing Koreans to reach their general, which happens after a long tank sequence. Then you kill the general, and suddenly, not too long after that, aliens appear, which you have to fight so you go back around the island to reach the evacuation point, to then fight things on a boat until the end of the game. And yes, I am intentionally leaving out the details. The gameplay of Crysis is, well, interesting. Starting with the good, the suit and energy mechanics are very innovative, even by 2019 standards, allowing you to choose between shields, speed, strength or stealth coming in the form of a cloaking device. Overall, all 4 of these choices have their uses, although I found myself mostly using shields and cloaking at the start of the game, and speed a bit towards the end when you were fighting the aliens. Although, for most of my game time, I was playing on the hard difficulty. I did switch down to normal so I could finish the playthrough just a little bit faster. I did also find a little bit of not force use for strength, although strength was forced to be used for certain obstacles because you had to jump over things that you couldn't normally jump over, which is okay. All in all though, the game's suit mechanic is pretty great and has few if any glitches that I've noted in my playtime. Speaking of glitches, there are your standard assortment of weapons glitching into walls, clunky physics, especially obvious on vehicles, and a glitch where if you jump off a ladder you glitch into your own legs. It doesn't break the game, but it does put your head inside of your leg when you crouch, which is questionable at best and means you've broken the laws of physics at worst. Though this glitch can be easily fixed by jumping a single time, which for some odd reason resets the view so you don't have to look out through your own knees when you crouch. Oh, I also managed to glitch a truck into unusability by ramming it through a building, which proceeded to collapse onto my truck, glitching it as if a pole had been stuck through the rear of my truck. Another glitch that pissed me off more than a few times was bullets sometimes either just completely disappearing or just phasing through enemies, causing point-blank shotgun shells to miss entirely. No stumble, no damage, and just generally no effect. This is the most detrimental glitch I've seen, as it has gotten me killed numerous times. Aside from the glitches, I only had one crash, which happened right at the final stage of the final boss fight when I was doing something I wasn't supposed to be, but still allowed me to complete the game quite easily because I just reloaded a save. On the topic of guns, Crysis features an alright selection of firearms with at least one of all the major categories. But that's about it, a handful of rather generic guns that don't do much outside of the norm. The most unique feature I saw was an underbarrel mounted sleep dart launcher, which is kind of cool to be fair, but other than that, the guns are bland as can be. Besides one or two which are a little less common to find in modern games. Those being the missile launcher, which uses a Half-Life-like mouse guiding system, and the tac cannon, a mini nuke launcher that locks onto targets, which sadly you only get to use for the final boss fight, and confused the hell out of me because the fight before the final boss fight leaves you with next to no ammo and the tac cannon in your inventory. You'd think it would be used then, but it isn't. There's also a Gauss rifle, which disappointed me because it's just a slightly more powerful sniper rifle, and it's not even that good to start with. Other than that, I found myself using the AK-47 replica the most because its ammo tended to be plentiful and it was reliable enough. I also used the shotgun a fair bit because it felt good to use, even though it wasn't particularly powerful, and the gun was the most prone gun to glitching out. The vehicles, unlike the weapons, stand out for a game of their time, for a number of reasons. They handle decently, there's a pretty good variety, they look pretty good, and they have pretty effective guns on them. This is all for the most part, by the way. This also includes a tank that is pretty fun to drive, but sadly you only get to drive once. Interestingly, your enemies also tend to drive a lot of vehicles, which sounds okay, until you realise they can mow you down in about half a microsecond if they can hit all their shots. On the topic of enemies, the enemies you fight for the longest portion of the game are more generic than the Call of Duty protagonists, basic enemy soldiers with various generic weapons. But on the other hand, in the late game you fight these ridiculous alien flying squid with a new much less generic weapon that only turns up once. These enemies are a nice change, but they aren't exactly fun to fight for multiple hours on end. The other twist with the introduction of these enemies is the introduction of freezing mechanics. Fuck freezing mechanics! Being frozen in place and shot repeatedly isn't fun if it happens once, and should never happen in any video game, ever. On the topic of these aliens, the final fight is a complete shitfest that is about as fun as stabbing yourself in the arm. You first fight an alien mech suit and it's just a horrible fight. You just have to do damage to it, and that's it. Oh wait, except you get an extremely limited choice of weapons, and the most powerful weapon in the game, which is in your inventory, is unable to be used, and your ammo supply is also almost non-existent. That sounds fun, doesn't it? Don't forget though, as soon as this is over, you gain a tiny cache of extra ammo, literally, a Gauss rifle, 25 rounds for it, and 40 rounds for the SCAR variant of the generic-ass assault rifle. And then you have to fight off a massive alien warship while under constant enemy assault. This isn't even a fun fight, you just have to shoot out its sentry guns, wait 15 seconds, lock onto its arm and nuke that, fight off a round of flying dickbags, wait 15 seconds, nuke its other arm, and then fight off another round of flying dickbags while it gets overhead. Oh yeah, and I didn't mention that the lock-on targeting on the nuke gun is glitchy as hell. If you move, it resets itself constantly but inconsistently, meaning you either have to be perfect with your aim on a higher difficulty or on a low enough difficulty where you can tank the damage output of at least one flying dickbag while you wait for the second nuke to lock on. And then, as it gets overhead, you get assaulted by ground enemies, and these never stop coming. If you kill them all, they just respawn. So I took to killing all but one and leaving the last one alive while I shot out the sentry guns and threw the final nuke. After that, you run to your Vitol hovership and jet the fuck out of Dodge. This fight is by far and away the worst fight in the game, and has definitely not stood up well to the test of time, with games such as Doom 2016 creating boss fights that are much more intricate and sometimes even more difficult, yet still feeling more fair and are much more fun to play through. Oh, and did I mention that you have all of your weapons and most of all a decent supply of ammo to hand in most of these games, not just literally a handful of mags. In conclusion, even though I've spent most of this video being extremely critical of it, Crysis isn't even close to a bad game, and don't get me wrong, I enjoyed most of my time playing this game. But on the other hand, I was sometimes just getting pissed off to hell and back, especially thanks to those fucking Korean helicopters that always come out of nowhere and just delete your health bar, and then repeat that after you reload the game. On a more positive note, the graphics were pretty great for a 2007 game, and the gunplay was completely serviceable, and even fairly fun in most situations, if not a little glitchy and audibly boring due to silencers being almost necessary for most of the game. The vehicles were certainly decent, although the physics was sometimes a little against them, and the enemies were mostly generic but decently fun to fight and not really bullshit in any way, most of the time. Besides those fucking helicopters. Fuck those damn helicopters. No, seriously, those helicopters can go to hell. Thank you for watching. Like, comment, and subscribe. I have been your host, Vert343, taking a look back on Crysis, and now signing off. Peace out, gentlemen.